Jarod Creed, JC Ag Financial Services. He has a business that does marketing, consulting services, crop insurance, financial analysis services. What else?
Carbon
credit programs.
legal, FSA, a glorified CFO, COO for farms. How about that?
Yeah, and he helps me out too. So glad to have Jarod here today. It's been a couple years, 2 years.
I don't know. It was cold as hell last time too.
So
Welcome to Nebraska.
yeah. Anyway, Jarod, not a very good introduction, but Jarod Creed.
All right. Good morning. All right. I want to just set the tone here a little bit, and I'll revisit this when we wrap up. For decades and decades and decades, when you're running your farm operation, the general rule of thumb was grain gets to a profitable price on the production that you have versus your cost of production, you sell some. Now, or historically, we would call that a three-legged stool. I got the cost of production, just like any other business. I've got the revenue that I generate from the physical grain. In ag, we have the third leg of the stool, crop insurance. Now, we arguably have like 5, 6, 7, 8 legs on this stool to consider. And if I wanted to put a couple things in order of importance, and it changes during the times of the year, crop insurance is arguably the most important piece now. Farm programs is number 2, and grain marketing is the last of importance as of today. In 18 to 24 months, that'll probably change again. But we're going to go through a whole bunch of different things to kind of paint some awareness around truly what the farmer's risk profile looks like today. Now, don't kill the messenger here. I get it. We go through boom and bust environments in agriculture. But a lot of the stuff that we'll show here, for lack of better words, just to be black and white transparent, the woe is me attitude in agriculture right now is complete bullshit. And we have to be careful in U.S. ag to question, in no order of importance, grain prices, trade deals, hiked input costs, so on and so forth, when in 2025, the revenue that's going to be generated from U.S. agriculture across all of the U.S., at least 20%, if not closer to 25%, is going to have nothing to do with the price or production of your physical grain. Now, we have to make sure that we are considering all those different buckets to make sure we're not hurting ourselves on the marketing decisions that we do make on that physical grain. So just setting the tone a little bit here for what we're going to walk through. We're going to go through a couple just high-level fundamentals here on soybeans and corn. The same old story year after year after year when it comes to Brazil. Where does their growth trajectory stop? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Their production on a bushel per acre basis is step for step with the U.S. Naturally, because of their currency and because of lack of infrastructure, they will consistently tend to be a cheaper origination point for global users of soybeans. So 40 million bushel per million metric ton of soybeans. Brazil will raise somewhere around, around 175 million ton this year. Pick a side. Mother Nature can influence them, don't get me wrong, but when you hear stories about weather in Brazil, pause for a second and say, well, where at between Los Angeles and New York City is that weather issue? That's how big the area truly is. They're going to raise 8 billion bushel of beans before 2030, and we'll raise 4 to 4.5. And it wasn't that many years ago, back in 2016, that they were growing equivalent of what the U.S. still grows. So a few other pieces to consider here is that they, just like the U.S., continue to evolve to make more domestic demand versus dependency on the global market. Soybeans, not near to the extent of what they are doing in corn. Their increased domestic demand from both feed and ethanol is on a very, very high trajectory, really starting in the last couple years. Is it going to turn into a new ethanol boom for Brazil, equivalent to what the U.S. saw back in the 2000s? Maybe not to that extreme, but it's something to keep mindful of. And remember, the stages of the growing season in Brazil, they're probably either side of 90% planted of their soybean crop right now. First planted stuff will start getting harvested right around Christmas time, and that harvest won't really end until about April 1. And give or take in that February-March time frame is when their corn crop will come to follow, the safrinha corn crop. And the last couple of years, they've been pretty fortunate on some pretty good yields. Their bean yields, step for step with the U.S., their corn yields still ranging in that give or take 125, 130 bushel an acre number. But it's not the end of the world if they continue to grow more, especially corn, as long as they continue to create additional domestic demand for that product. And naturally, we'll talk about corn exports out of the U.S. here in a minute. The U.S. farmer doesn't want as much exportable quantities of corn to leave Brazil, and let us be the kingpin in that space. Now here's a couple charts that just stick out like an absolute sore thumb. I just showed how Brazil's production has increased by 3 billion bushel in a 7-8 year stretch. This is looking at percent of production that is exported out of each country. That is pretty much a flat line. Nothing has changed. Good, bad, indifferent, trade deal, what have you. But Brazil's trajectory shows no signs of stopping at this point. From 60% to 70% on the heels of over 4 billion bushel increase of production. So it just is probably a solid reminder of when this started. We used to go around the country and joke that, hey, come Valentine's Day, you need to do two things. You better have a gift for your wife, and you better have your beans taken care of. Because at that point, Brazil will take over the global export market. That's not going to change, but we have the darling of U.S. ag industry is the increase in soybean crush. You don't have to go all that far away from here to find an additional, give or take 100 million bushel of additional soybean crush that has been added in the last 3 years. You've got David City, you've got Alta, Iowa, and find a few others. You get up by Mitchell, South Dakota. All of those are close enough to this area, and I can't think of any of them that would be right south of here, but I'm sure there are. The margins in that space may be tied a little bit to the green energy push, renewable fuels and such. I don't think that train is going to stop anytime soon. So we continue to shift towards more of a domestic demand versus dependency in an export market. So as a general rule of thumb, if we raise 4.2, 4.5 billion bushel of beans, depending on the year, we would crush half, we would export half, and we would keep about 300, 400, 500 million bushel behind. That is changing, and it's changing really, really quick. In fact, our soybean crush this year will be probably 200 to 300 million bushel more than what we have ever exported. So that is a bright piece. That is a miniature corn ethanol boom. And we need to keep the soybean crusher healthy. We need to keep their demand for their products healthy. Probably more specifically than anything, soybean oil. Soybean meal can be a real pain in the butt. But that trend shows no signs of slowing right now. So now you look at the same type of concept of percent of production going to export versus percent going into crush. That trajectory on crush percentage is no different than Brazil's trajectory on export percentage. Naturally, our exports flatline, our crush continuing to climb. We've really, really diverged since 1920, and I would say really sped up coming out of COVID. So, again, if there's a bright spot in the soybean market, that's what we are facing today. So I take that one step further. You don't have to, whether it's a newspaper, the radio, a website, whatever, one of the first things you read about is Chinese trade war. There's going to come a day where we really don't have a surplus of beans that we can, quote unquote, afford to ship to China in the first place. Our dependency on exporting beans to China will slowly continue to deteriorate. That is nationally. Now, regionally, there are definitely areas that don't have enough domestic demand and more so focused on loading shuttle trains October 1 to February 1 and clear those stocks as fast as they can. That would be predominantly north of here. South Dakota, North Dakota, to a certain extent down in the Delta, northwest Minnesota and such, heavily dependent on soybean exports. They have maybe felt a little bit of the pressure from a lack of a robust Chinese soybean program. As of yesterday, Scott Bessent kind of walked back his comments that China was supposed to buy 12 million ton of beans by the end of this calendar year. There is a difference between buying beans and shipping them. With our current corn export program, we would have no shot whatsoever of exporting 400 or 500 million bushel of beans from middle of October to January 1 in the first place. So the framework, loose words framework is buy 12 million ton and supposedly by the end of February now. They're about halfway there. And then the next 2 years buy 25 million ton. So you look at this and say, well, are we really going to sell them 25 million ton? I doubt it. And that's not really all that bad of a thing either, because we don't have the supply to do so. Now, if I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, that China does source that amount of volume of beans from us, we all of a sudden get back to an old school battle for acres, potentially. We need more bean acres to satisfy domestic crush. We need more bean acres to satisfy our export demand. Now, one other piece in the export demand, sorry to keep walking in circles here, there is also a risk that every 100 million bushel of beans we sell to China is just replacing some other smaller Asian country. It's not going to be a 100 million bushel increase or a 100 million bushel increase. There's going to be replacements in that. Our export program in the last year and a half has been, instead of front-loaded the first 4 or 5 months after harvest, it's more stringing out 9, 10, 11 months throughout the year now, because not every country has the ability to take the volume in such a short amount of time, such as China. So, what was probably the biggest surprise of 2025, to this point, the world that we live in, there could be surprises any given day. Orange, March intentions, blue are final acres in June. This year, we had a massive swing from our June, quote-unquote, final acres to August. The economics to planting corn were strong for the last 12 months, and the farmer reacted to those economics and to the price opportunities, especially relative to soybeans. That has never changed and will never change. Rotation does not matter anymore. Cannot emphasize that enough. The U.S. farmer, between technology, genetics, everything that they got at their fingertips, price is going to dictate it. One piece that is becoming a pretty salty trend is whatever that March planting intention number is, you might as well just say, well, we need to add 1 million to 2 million acres to it, because that's where we're going to end up at. Maybe that trend will change at some point, but the surprise this year was almost a 3 million acre jump from what we thought our March intentions were to June final planted acres to all of a sudden August. All the farmer data is collected. Hey, we planted 98, almost 99 million acres of corn. In hindsight, it shouldn't have been a surprise, but I think the entire U.S. market kind of got lulled to sleep that, all right, this 95, 97 number, we're going to stick with that and we're going to move forward with it, and we blew it out of the water. Soybeans, kind of the exact opposite. A big reduction in August, but you can also see that trend. Farmer continues to react from what they say in March to what they actually do is 2 different paths. More corn, less beans. I don't think we have the ability to move that bean acreage number any lower than where it presently is. With that said, it does not mean that we lose corn acres. We're going to gain the corn plus soybean pie from replacing wheat acres, replacing milo acres, maybe a little bit of sunflowers here or there, rice, cotton. You know, we think that, I shouldn't say we think, but the pressure is on in the corn and soybean farmer. The pressure is really, really on for the rice, cotton, and wheat farmer. Wheat, average break even, if you think about Kansas and South Dakota as an example, is probably $2 a bushel higher than where present wheat prices are. Corn, boom or bust environment. We'll get into the safety nets here in a second. That risk is nowhere near the same. And when they hit the boom, it's incredible. We have a tremendous amount of clients up along Interstate 90 from Sioux Falls west over to the river. 130, 140 bushel type of corn guys. Not a single one of them averaged across probably 50,000 acres of corn up there. Every single one of them over 200 bushel an acre. Boom or bust. Last year, or 2 years ago, 30. All right, so big acres in places of the world with the safety nets allow them to be okay. So, and a quick note on that, you know, the pressure of this part of the world, the corn production, predominantly speaking, would Corteva agree? As farther north as you get from here, the production was better and better and better relative to normal. Stellar production the further north you get. So,
hey Jarod, I've got a question about your crush. So you talked about the Delta, you talked about Minnesota, you talked about some of those areas that were dependent upon the export market. Do you see an acre shift happening there? Will those guys, I mean, we saw bean basis go $1, sometimes wider, sometimes no bids up in that Minnesota area. Do you think that acre shifts happen up there, or do you think they'll continue to be as planned?
There will be a small shift, but now we have to think about the dynamic of the Northern Plains farmer. As a percentage of their production versus their on-farm space, it's wildly different than here. There are farms up there that can hold 1.5 years to 2 years worth of crop. And when I say farms, a lot of them. Farm storage is plenty up there. There are multiple towns that literally have more bins than people live there. You don't have to travel far to see that. They have space to keep it, and as a dependency on a rail bid to get that product out of their backyard to somewhere else, at the same time, more crush is being built. Handful of ethanol plants in North Dakota, handful of soybean processing plants. You know, maybe in North Dakota you can see that swing because they're predominantly a 3 million acres of corn, 6 million acres of soybeans. Stutsman County, North Dakota, Jamestown, North Dakota is the largest producing soybean county behind only one county in all the U.S. But they have a lot of soybean crush right there. So the idea of a shift there, the total principal corn and soybean acres, you might see a shift between the two as a percentage, but the total area probably runs a risk of going up. Even up in that part of the world, maybe some less sugar beets, definitely less spring wheat. Different pieces that are just going to, you know, quote unquote, allow the farmer to maybe push the envelope. Instead of 3.2 million acres of corn, we're going to plant closer to 4, 700,000, 800,000 acres. That matters when you're starting from 95 or more. And that's more than just North Dakota. That's all of, I don't know, call it Interstate 94 from Minneapolis up to Fargo. And that valley that you cross up into, up and down the Red River Valley, and all the way north of Interstate 90, that area continues to gear up for more and more corn. I don't know where that trend stops. So, on the demand side, another darling of the current market is no secret, our corn exports are absolutely on fire. We can definitely thank Mexico for a huge part of that. But in addition, months and months and months and months of $4 corn does nothing but increase global demand. Everybody's margins get better. So the demand continues to build, and there is a possibility that this year's U.S. corn export program could be as much as, you know, maybe even 2.8 billion bushel. We need to ship a lot of the sales that we have This is our commitments year to date. That is a record for this time of year, as you can see. And our prior record, what's really fun to think about here, our prior record, China was about 400 to 500 million bushel at this point of our prior record in 2021. China is pretty much zero of our U.S. corn right now. So everybody else, excluding China, continues to want U.S. corn. It's almost like the good old days when somebody needed corn, they would call ADM, Bunge, Cargill, whoever. What's the price of corn? Well, this is the price. Well, I don't like it. All right, well, have a good day. Because they had no other choice where to buy it. Now, because of that expansion in Brazil, because of maybe some escalation happening in Russia and Ukraine again, I mean, it's pretty much a Brazil, Argentina, U.S., and Ukraine game anymore for corn exports. And it makes the hair stand up on my arms just a little bit here. It might be time to pay just a little bit more attention again to what is happening in Russia and Ukraine. Just the mere hint 2 days ago of Putin stating if Ukraine doesn't stop attacks on Russian soil, he'll have no other choice but to shut Ukraine off from sea access again. And you've seen insurance rates and freight rates explode by 200% in the last 2-3 weeks. And I don't know, we don't want to get into politics there, but maybe something to be mindful of. So now you just think about the export situation between corn and soybeans. It's polar opposite between each other, no secret. As a percentage of our USDA export estimate of what we have completed, this is basically, you have an export sale that is reported either in a flash sale on a daily basis or cumulatively weekly sales. Thank you to the U.S. government shutdown. We will not be caught up on export sales until pretty much Christmas because they're releasing 2 reports a week. So like this morning's export sales data was from like the middle of October, real ideal, or late October, sometime in that situation. But inspections were still released on a weekly basis from the government. I sell it, I inspect it, and or considered shipping it. Every bushel that leaves town, leaves the U.S., rail, boat, what have you, is inspected. So cumulatively, you can see 2024-25 is the blue, orange 25-26 for the what we have actually cumulatively shipped to this point in time. So corn, rocking and rolling. Soybeans were definitely down. I wouldn't consider it an alarming amount at this point. Come Christmas time, then it gets a little bit more concerning because we need to get those stocks moving and certainly not walk back our export estimates. A lot of chatter in the marketplace today that people would feel that we have, give or take, 150 million bushel of fluff in the soybean export number. And maybe that is going to be dictated based upon what China does or doesn't buy. On the corn side, we probably don't have a lot of fluff in the export number. We don't have a lot of fluff in the ethanol number. The biggest question mark in corn is we have a boatload of fluff in the feed and residual. And you have to remember that supply versus demand is elastic. They're not static to each other. Let's just say that the common belief out in the industry is that corn yields were overstated. So be it. Let's work with that for a second. We lower our production by a couple 100 million bushel. Come the January report, cut national yield by 2 or 3 bushel. That can happen, but we'll probably take 60-70% of that supply reduction right out of the residual bucket. There is a lot of fat in the residual bucket here as of today. So we need ethanol, we need exports to stay strong. And as always, if globally there's tension between Ukraine and Russia, or there's a shortage of supply in South America, that will do nothing but speed up the demand for our product domestically. All right, any questions on the fundamental piece right now? Because quite frankly, we spent 15 months in a 70-cent range on soybeans until about a month and a half ago. All right, If I was here a year ago and you bet me that, I bet you $100 that we would trade more than a 70-cent range in soybeans over the next 12 months, I would have lost that bet. Corn, primarily a 50-cent range for the last 12 months. There hasn't been much to talk about fundamentally in the corn and soybean market for an extended period of time. And I don't know if we're necessarily out of the woods yet on that, but personal opinion, if corn's going to legitimately make a move, it's going to probably need to happen in the next 2 to 3 months. And if it doesn't, I would say an equilibrium says fair value of corn on the board is give or take the 430 to 450 range. You can't ignore where we've been for the last several months and see demand continue to stay as strong as it is and have expectations that we actually need to ramp that up even more. The odds of walking away with less than a 2 billion bushel carryout on corn this year when we fast forward all the way to July or August is pretty slim, absent of some major surprise in the January report for our final yield. But I think even if we cut 4 to 5 bushel an acre off the yield, I still don't know if that's going to take us below a 2 billion bushel carryout. So it's kind of what we have to work with today, but the stocks to use based upon that carryout versus our demand, that is equivalent to years and years ago of probably having like a 1.5, 1.6 billion bushel carryout. Okay? And it's kind of like what it was being talked about on the agronomy side. Think about the what if. Think about the what if from Illinois, Iowa, and Nebraska if a lot of this disease pressure truly did not come in. The what if is a little alarming of if you want to start next year's national yield anywhere lower than 180 bushel an acre, you better have some really, really, really good research and evidence to back that up. Honestly, there's probably going to models that will put a yield all the way up closer to 190 rather than closer to 180 for next year's corn acres. So that's just, it acts as a wet blanket until it's not. So changing gears here a little bit, and I think this winter, you have to do homework on this type of stuff. The big beautiful bill created a tremendous amount of changes for farm program safety nets and the mechanics of these farm program safety nets. Some of the most important pieces being reference price changes, payment limitations, getting the higher of the two of PLC or Ark County for the crop that you just harvested. I hope all of you know that to this point. It does not matter what you elected in February of last year. I'll pull those slides up, but for Cass County, the odds of not maxing out a corn Ark County payment is slim to none. There's going to be $120 to $125 an acre payment on this year's corn, regardless of what you yielded, regardless of what you planted. You take your base acres. Let me back up. Your research this winter needs to start with asking the FSA office for a form called EZ156. Remember that. If there's one thing that I would ask you to remember, EZ156. That's going to have all of your farm program information. You're going to have a form that's going to have a farm number, 1578, and it's going to show corn base acres, soybean base acres, maybe in this part of the world, wheat, maybe milo, and who knows, maybe some other stuff. There could still be some sunflowers and oats and that type of stuff sitting out there too. But in addition to those base acres, it's also going to have another line that says what your PLC yield is for each one of those crops. This part of the world, your PLC corn yield probably ranges from 120 to 140. It does not matter about the Ark County side on yield because that's all county based. On the soybean PLC yield, probably anywhere from 30 to 40. Now, we don't get an opportunity to update those yields yet, but we should know in the next 30 days, I'd imagine, before March 1, we're going to get to update the amount of base acres, not change your base acres by crop. We got to do that back in 2016, I think. But we're going to get to increase the overall base acres if you have eligibility. Let's say I farm 1,200 acres, but my EZ 156 shows I only have 1,000 acres. Well, that 200 acre difference could very well be based upon CRP or pasture ground or what have you, changes to land that created more tillable acres over the years. The FSA would still certify those acres on insurance side, but the farm program would not account for those. Sometime between now and March 1, you probably get a chance to review that. EZ 156, base acres by farm number. It's going to go all the way down into tracts. You don't have to worry about the tracts by farm number. It's simply on the front page of the EZ 156. You ask the FSA office, they're not going to be happy when they ask for it, I promise you. Because it's 2025 and they still have to print it off in the form of a PDF, scan it, email it to you. If you farm 2,000 acres, you're probably going to have 30 different attachments in an email. Now, fortunately, with today's technology, we're able to take that information and, of all things, put it into AI and say, here, summarize this for me. And what does that do for us? We now get to start calculating what our exposure is in Ark County and PLC and how that works in a big picture. Ark County changes that are really, really important. The payment cap went from 10% to 12%. The payment cap is taking a 5-year Olympic average of the county yield times a 5-year Olympic average of the marketing year average price. Not you, the entire nation. You take those two times each other, your max payment is equivalent of 12% of that number. So when I talk about Cass County having a max payment for the crop that just got harvested of $124 an acre, that $124 is representative of that 12%. Now furthermore, your trigger on our county, that yield times that price times 90%. If the final county yield times the marketing year average price comes in lower than 90%, our county triggers. And it's paid not on what you planted. Remember, your base acres times the payment amount times 86%. PLC in our county, you're always going to get paid on 86% of your base acres. So even if one more situation, if I farm 2,000 acres and I planted 1,500 acres of corn, 500 acres of beans, I'm not getting protection on our county or PLC on that 1,500 acres that I planted in the event I have 1,200 acres of corn base, 800 acres of a bean base. In fact, I'm getting 86% of the 1,200 versus the 1,500 acres of corn that I actually planted. Okay? EZ 156. Say it one last time. Let's see, what else do I have on here? Raise the reference prices across all of that. I'll show some examples. Another piece, this is a big one. In the top right, SCO in our county. SCO and ECO have been getting more and more traction in the last couple of years because of the increased subsidies to those programs. 80% subsidized now. SCO and ECO are both county-based. But you were not allowed to carry SCO if you carried Ark County prior. Ark County, SCO, ECO uses all the exact same yield. They use different prices. SCO, ECO, your insurance products, use the February insurance price and the October insurance price. Ark County and PLC compare the reference price versus the final marketing year average price. And to really throw a kink in things here, February and October for insurance, the marketing year average price doesn't even start until September 1 and ends the following August. So the crop that you just harvested, we're 3 months into the average. You see it monthly on USDA WASDE reports. It shows farm gate average price, and presently it's $10.50 soybeans and $4 corn. And I'll show you those examples here in a little bit. By February 1, 60% of the corn marketing year average price should be established. Meaning the U.S. farmer has, in essence, sold about 60% of their corn crop. That makes it that much harder to move that average from that point forward, which means two things. Market goes up, you're maintaining an Ark County payment that was already there because that average is not going to move as fast as the market goes up. Vice versa, if I'm sitting on a bunch of unsold inventory and the market goes down, that marketing your average price is not going to have the same reaction to a lower price. Meaning my safety net is to my favor if the market goes up. My safety net is not to my favor if the market goes down. Soybeans will be about 60% marketed here come January 1. Another big piece here that the conversation that is a struggle for a lot of U.S. farms is transition. Arguably, the changes at the RMA and the big beautiful bill should be speeding up transition, not keeping somebody else around for a longer time frame. Reason being, the beginning farmer rancher program extended from 5 years all the way to 10 years. This means in this part of the world, if I'm a brand new farmer, I've never certified at the FSA, even if I've farmed with family for 20 years, the elder could go insure a crop for, let's just say, $20 an acre. That younger individual versus that 20 is going to probably spend $6 or $7 an acre. In addition, that younger individual is going to get to cherry pick the highest APH out of all of that farm, that entire operation, and use that as their starting mark. Have better coverage, have cheaper premium, a bigger safety net. On top of that as well, I don't know if I already flipped through that, payment limitations. Payment limitations now went from $125,000 up to $155,000 per eligible individual. Get entity out of your mind, individual. If I'm a husband and wife, I better make sure that I'm a husband and wife at the FSA office because that's two $155,000 payment eligibilities. If I'm an S Corp, that's okay. I have all these individuals that have their own payment eligibility. If I'm an LLC, same thing, does not matter. If I'm a C Corp, if you are a C Corp, you better go talk to your accountant right now and get that fixed. Because the C Corp has one payment eligibility and that's it. It is a competitive industry, it's a competitive landscape, and you run the risk of, well, let's just say this. I got use another example. I'm a 3,000 acre corn farmer. 3,000 acre farmer. I plant 2,000 acres of corn. I plant 1,000 acres of beans. But my base acres are 1,700 acres of corn. So 85% of 1,700 would be what? Take 250 off of that, call it 1,450 acres. 1,450 acres times $125 an acre, that individual's already at the payment eligibility before we even talk about soybeans. So I've coined it in this way, talking to some farms, of maybe speeding up this transition. Why go halfway? Why go halfway instead of going the full way when increasing payment eligibility, spending less money on better insurance coverage than what you would procure in the first place? A real number, a 12,000 acre farm up in Pocahontas County, Iowa, brand new to us, husband, wife, his son and his wife. They have 3 kids that are coming up. Making these changes and getting all 3 kids in there is at minimum $1 million swing to their operations. That's real money. It's real money. The programs have changed, and let's not point the finger at the government if it puts me in the bullseye. We have to do our homework to adapt to what the programs, how they have changed. Yes?
You got kids, don't they have to be so old before they can sign stuff in this?
You ever heard the phrase, don't hate the player, hate the game? That's the world that we live in right now. No, 14 years old. You got $2. What's that?
Drinking water act like they had to be 16 or 18.
Nope. Nope. And I'm getting into the weeds here. Let's say that I'm a 50-year-old farmer. I still plan on farming another 5, 10, 15 years, what have you. But I've got younger generation that is right there on the cusp. sophomore, junior, senior in high school, college students. Another crazy example, farm in northern Missouri has 2 kids in college. Putting them on a certification on, 1,500 acres apiece, paid for the balance of their college tuition, each one of them, just on insurance savings and better coverage. But the internal piece of how this can still work is, let's just say I'm an S Corp and I've got all these different individuals. From a beginning farmer rancher perspective, every individual in the S Corp has to be eligible for anybody to have eligibility on the cheaper insurance premiums. But in the S Corp, everybody would have their own payment limitation. So if I'm an S Corp of mom, dad, father, wife, or son, wife, I leave those alone and I have those kids farming in 2 other individual entities and figure out the money behind the scenes, right? If a crop raises $1,000 an acre and I spent $900 to grow it, well, what's my custom farming bill going to be to that other entity? About 99% of the revenue that it generated. I pay for the inputs, I pay for the equipment. They literally had to write a couple checks in the form of maybe paying their insurance premium. They get a grain check. The grain just has to be sold under their name to the volume that they produce. They might get a farm program check, and we figure out the money internally, and that's a CPA and baker's job, right? To really, iron out the intricacies on that front. Let's see, did I miss anything here? Okay, now this is one piece that is, there's a good and bad piece about this. I'm a little concerned, or probably more concerned now than the last couple years, that with the increase of subsidies, with the changes to farm program safety nets, the new insurance products, it does make it easier for financial institutions to loan money in today's cost of production environment. It removes some of the jagged edges. It ultimately runs a risk of removing some historical volatility. If we go plant a lot of corn acres and a lot of soybean acres, and there's never really a battle between the two, at the end of the day, we planted a lot of stuff. And when you plant a lot of stuff, it takes the edge off of yield concerns. No different than this last growing season. Oh my gosh, we got all these corn acres. Who cares if the yield is 175 or 185? We got plenty of it with all those acres. It takes a big, big weather event that is always doable to really change things up from that front. I want to touch base on this payment limitation one more time. That is a big, big piece. I estimate that, I just know this one for Iowa, I could do it for Nebraska, about 1,200 acres of an average farm butts up against that 155,000 payment limitation. 1,200 acres. So
Is that a single entity or is that
one individual, one eligible individual, basically one social security number. It's not easy, I promise you. And we're just talking about the farm program piece. We haven't even dipped into what the farm program means for crop insurance. And that's why I go back to that 3-legged stool comment. Crop insurance more important than farm program, and farm program presently more important than the marketing, because we'll get into the safety net prices here in just a second. I told you best of PLC or ARC for this year. Come March 15th, you will revert back to choosing which program you want your base acres to be involved in. And it is not, to sound like a real arrogant prick here, it is not asking the FSA office, well, what is everybody else doing? You have to do your homework on your own. You have to marry that up to what am I planting? What am I going to carry on crop insurance? And make sure those are all intertwined together versus just, sign me up for what everybody else is doing. And stress testing that to make sure, is that safety net as where I need it to be? So I'm going to be the bad guy here for about 5 minutes to make sure that we do not, or we be mindful of the situation for the next 12 or 24 months has created such a high safety net from outside funding sources that it's almost time like, hey, we got to capitalize on this. We got to capitalize on it because generally speaking, you go into I don't care, go into the local school, go into downtown Omaha or Lincoln, and imagine having a conversation with somebody that a mom, dad, 3 kids, bringing home $150,000 a year from their job, and then just basically saying, oh, well, the government paid me more than what you're earning as a couple just on my farm ground. That creates a negative light in the industry, and I'm painting a picture here 2 years out, 2.5 years out. All this money, this $40 billion that's going to agriculture this year, it's going to come front and center focus in the Senate and the House in the next election. So, not trying to get political, but it's going to come. So, what do we have so far this year? ECAP, that was the money you got primarily back in February. You got 85% of it. And then just about a month ago, we got 14 of the balance of the 15% that was owed. That program is done. It was approximately $8 billion. It was paid on last year's corn, soybean, wheat acres that you planted. It was about $40 for corn, 30 and change for wheat and beans. SDRP Stage 1, now the new hot topic. SDRP Stage 1, if you qualified for Phase 1, it was because you had primarily a yield-only claim on a crop in a county in 23 or 24. Key piece here, keep this in the back of your mind. If you find yourself in a situation that, well, why didn't I get paperwork? Why have I not had this? I said yield only. Price drop is not a disaster in the eyes of these farm program payments. When you file an insurance claim, do not put anything in there about price drop causing a loss. You always have the ability to grow better. When's the best opportunity for a bag of seed? When it's still in the bag. So what happened during the growing season to not reach its potential? Anybody that put price drop on insurance claims in 23 and 24, you are not getting anything from SDRP. Unless you can pull a rabbit out of your hat and talk to your AIP, not your insurance agent, not your insurance agency, the insurance company, of changing your cause of loss. You think that that might just be a chump change comment. I'm going to guess that if you find that it says price drop and you would be eligible for a 6-digit payment, you might have a little bit different a feeling, and you might want to go look into that cause of loss of 23 and 24. Right now, as we're talking, the industry to all insurance companies is having a webinar about SDRP Stage 2. Stage 2 is supposed to be for shallow loss. As in 2023, I carried an 80% insurance policy, and I had a 200 bushel APH. It's 160 bushel an acre. If I yielded below that 160, that qualified me for Phase 1. And in that Phase 1, that number that it would have said at the bottom, you received 35% of it. But that total at the bottom also included retroactively increasing your insurance coverage by 15%. So if I carried an 80, retroactively, in the eyes of the government, I now have a 95. But if I yielded 82% of my APH, I didn't have a yield-only claim, I didn't qualify for Phase 1, Phase 2 is now going to look at everybody else of the retroactive insurance increase, and if I yielded 82 versus 95, 13% difference, times the spring price of that year, you're going to get 35% of that money. There's still $11 billion left over in the SDRP Phase 2. Nobody's going to get more than somebody else. It's all going to be broke down as the percentages to start and then basically apply the rest of the dollars. In my personal opinion, anybody that got a Phase 1 payment, you are likely to get close to, maybe not as much, but about the same amount again that you got on Phase 1 sometime after the first of the year. Now, according to Senator Thune, SDRP Phase 2 is going to get paid this year. I doubt it, but I do laugh, and I'll pick on you here for a second, when somebody says, well, I'm planning my taxes. They need to defer that till next year. Just stop. Just take the money and worry about the tax situation later. Talking to you, Gary. And then,
I got a a little, phase one, but I was down there yesterday and they acted like my name was on the list to get phase two.
Last week,
On different counties.
Yes.
That I got in phase one.
yes, because you didn't qualify for the yield only by crop by county in those other counties in phase one. So there's 11 billion left in that program, and a lot of money to go out. That'll take some time. Hopefully we're smarter as we go. If you call the FSA last week or the beginning of this week, your name was probably just getting written on a big chief tablet. That was about it. Because unfortunately, at the FSA office, the industry knows, oh, this program is open, and the FSA doesn't even get the data for it for 3, 4, 5 days later. The CCC, Commodity Credit Corp, is still full to the gills with money. That is probably what's going to fund some type of tariff relief payment. That Secretary Rollins has said over and over and over again, something's coming, something's coming. Yesterday or the day before, she said, expect the deal to be announced next week. Senator Thune again says that money will not come until next year. You can breathe a sigh of relief, Gary.
Can I take his?
So, I want to build on this and just to consider these for just a second. There's a lot of stuff that has happened and is in process. Our county PLC money won't come until October of 2026, let alone what other programs evolve between now and then. And then we probably are already talking about a realistic situation of having a payment in October of 2027 for the Ark County and PLC election that you are going to make come March. All right, it's just a lot of money, but the CCC fund is full. It is ready. There's estimates as low as 10 billion. There's estimates as high as 20 billion. I highly doubt that the wheat and corn lobbyists would allow it to be all eccentric to just soybeans. It's probably going to look, in my opinion, similar to ECAP. A certain payment per acre based upon what you planted by crop. So, I don't know, maybe, in my opinion, if you do rough math, add 20% to the ECAP payment. Because that's going to be 12, 13, maybe a little bit more than 20%, but 12, 13 billion dollars in between that 10 and 20 number. Any questions so far?
I got one.
Yes.
Go back to the SDRP stage one. A lot of us did not have claims in Cass County on the 24 crop. Hit the stage two one more time. What does that mean for guys like that?
Stage two will look at your 2024 APH. It'll increase your insurance coverage by 15%. So you carried 70, now you have 85. You carried 80, now you got 95. If you carried 85, it's only going to 95. Okay, it's not going higher than 95. And at that point, they are retroactively recalculating what your revenue to count was at harvest based upon the increased coverage versus what you would have been guaranteed if you had that higher coverage.
Clear as mud.
Okay, let's do it this way. 100 bushel APH, 80% policy. I'm guaranteed 80 bushel. Okay? And let's just say that the spring price was $5. 80 times 5, $400 an acre. Remember that number. 100 bushel APH, 95% policy. Now I'm guaranteed 95 times $4. Now I'm guaranteed $380. Wait, 195. I'm messing that math up. No, $380. What was the first number? 400. Oh. What am I messing up here? 480. There we go.
Yeah.
I'm from Kansas. Excuse me. That difference right there between those two is the additional revenue that you're now guaranteed. That 15 bushel an acre difference times that 5 price, that $75 an acre, in essence, is what your additional coverage would have been. That makes sense? And so if you did not generate all that additional 75, whatever that shortfall is, you're going to get 35% of that in phase 2. And then phase 2.1 or phase 3, what have you, they'll disperse the balance of the money equally across the nation. Now, one good thing for the Western Corn Belt farmer is the Eastern Corn Belt yields, for the most part, in 23-24 were stellar. And it's going to be really, really hard for much money to be distributed there. And if you look at the SDRP program dashboard, you can Google that and watch how much money's been paid out, that it is predominantly Western Corn Belt, west of the Mississippi. The huge percentage of money that's been paid out. And also keep in mind, it's not just corn, soybeans, wheat. There's like 80, 90 different commodities on there that still collectively add up to something when it's all said and done. That answer your question, Brad?
Yep, thanks.
This is maybe where three pieces here that are just a little bit dangerous. That I think it is safe to say that in the last 4, 5, 6 years, with what I just consider the open government checkbook, about a third of that money ends up staying in a farmer's pocket. And everybody else is getting their share. No offense, Corteva. No offense, Bayer. No offense, Koch brothers, Nutrien, on down the list. No offense, landowners. No offense, Deere and Case IH. But has any of that stuff got cheaper in the last 5 years? No. It's like a supply and demand. Supply of money versus demand of the product, allowing the farmer to continue to do what they want to do. And at the same time, maybe the most happy individual in present time is the banker to help eliminate some of these cash flow gaps that are coming. And that cash flow gap is something important as well. We've had numerous conversations with bankers and CPAs to explain the revenue for the farm as whole. It's not taking a big hit. It's just coming at different times. We have control of when we get paid on our physical grain after it's shipped, but we don't have control of an Ark County or PLC payment. We don't have control of an add-on insurance product when that gets paid. We don't have control of ad hoc money. But collectively, if you really add it all up, it would definitely impact somebody's marketing decisions. The soybean side, that soybean export weakness reduces market revenue. That's a problem to the extent that, in theory, in the last couple of years, we should have been planting less beans, right? Should have been. We're increasing our domestic crush, but there are parts of the world that should have been planting less beans. Well, when you go 3 out of 5 years getting a check on soybeans for equivalent of $1 a bushel or greater, that kind of goes some extra miles and keeps that crop being planted. I think the biggest risk here is this bottom piece, that structural margins will worsen as our cost basis continues to increase. There is a give and take that, yes, I got short-term funds coming from this, but it doesn't really paint a rosy picture to expect that any of our cost of doing business is going to go lower. Now, I'm going to flip that on its head. 7, 8 years ago, Central Iowa farmer would have cost us $800 an acre to grow a corn crop. Let's say I got 200 bushel APH, 85% policy, $4 spring price. I'm guaranteed $680 an acre at that point. $680 an acre, worst case, versus $800 cost. $120 an acre, based upon $800 cost, 15% risk. Now, I fast forward to it cost me $1,200 an acre to grow that same corn crop, and my worst case is $1,100 an acre. My dollars per acre is tighter, and a percentage of that is all the way down to around 9%. So it's almost like we have to keep it in context that on one hand, this stuff might be stripping out some volatility in the marketplace, but on the other hand, my market risk, my worst case situation, is actually today a lot healthier than it's ever been. And again, that's as time evolves within Ark County and PLC. Not my slide here, but I had to put it in here. Pros of all these payments: liquidity during downturns, reduces bankruptcy risks, supports rural economies. I think that one's really, really important, the rural economies. The cons: it masks unprofitable production that we just continue to grow. That's a big piece. Grow our way out of it and hope that the market rallies. Hope that something else happens somewhere else. It distorts land markets. I don't know about right around here. I live in Blackhawk County, Iowa, over by Waterloo. Victim of it myself to an extent, but any good dirt above 90 CSR is going to start with a 2. for the foreseeable future. $20,000 an acre or greater. Did you see Sioux County earlier this week? $32,000 an acre, beating the prior record of 30 just about 7-8 months ago. Creates long-term dependence. I don't know if I necessarily believe that one, but it's still something to consider. Last comment on my opinion on this stuff. This is what we're going to get into here now. Costs, management, it's tough, but it's doable. I think everybody can be frugal when they need to. Making sure we're not chasing away Uncle Sam by creating long-term unnecessary debt just for that write-off. And secondly, understanding the farm program coupled with insurance type of situations. So let's unpack this for a second before I go to a couple examples for the local area. Does everybody in here now know at least ECO and SCO, what they mean? Enhanced coverage option, supplemental coverage option. Make it really, really easy and just package them together and say that I can carry 95% down to my multi-peril level. So in this situation, I'm carrying an 80% policy. ECO and SCO is going to give me coverage from 95 down to 80%. The coverage that is being created is taking the county APH, not your APH, times the same spring price that your multi-peril is using, and then it's calculating what that 15% band of coverage is. So if the county yield times price is 1,000, and I've got 15% of coverage between ECO and SCO, I've got an additional $150 an acre of coverage. Because of the changes in subsidy, does not matter where you are, who your agent is, what company you're writing it with, does not matter. For everybody, it's in essence $1 per acre expense for every additional $10 an acre of coverage you're getting. So if I'm getting an extra 150, that's 15 increments of 10. I'm getting $150 of coverage for 15 bucks. One last piece, that $150 coverage is also going to be calculated in conjunction, not against, but in conjunction with your APH. Meaning, if the county expected yield is 200, but your APH is 220, you're 10% higher, right? So that $150 an acre of coverage, you're getting 110% of that. You're getting 165. And that same 165, 16.5 increments times $1, $16.50 an acre for $165 an acre of coverage. And I'll tell you right here, I'll die on this hill, sorry if you don't like it, there's not a single farmer in all the U.S. that should not be carrying ECO and SCO anymore. It's free freaking money. And in this part of the world, I think it has like a payment rate of like 70% across the last 30 years. It's yield and it's price focused. Does not matter what you yield. Does not matter how you market your grain. Does not matter about your farm program. It's so subsidized anymore that it has to be carried. And oh, by the way, if I'm a beginning farmer rancher, instead of paying $1 for every $10 of coverage, I'm paying 30 cents for every $1. So imagine all of a sudden now, I get to go acquire an extra $150 of coverage an acre, and I'm getting that for $7, $8 an acre at the most. That's $7, $8 an acre across an entire farm operation. It's real cash staying in your pocket. And oh, I get to use that higher APH as well. And oh, I just created an additional farm program payment limitation to boot. Going all the steps within the structure that has been laid out. So now, I've got my multi-peril policy, I've got my SCO, ECO, I have to decide that by March 15th, and coincidentally at the same time, I have to elect Ark County or PLC. By that point in time, you probably know what you're going to plant. We get a long look between now and then to see what markets have done. It won't be but a week or two. The FSA office is going to start calling you, asking, do you want 2026 in Ark County or PLC? Do not answer them yet. You have to align that with your insurance decision. And here's why. I put my grain marketing to the side. I know that my reference prices are really high. Cass County, the yield that our county is going to use is going to be give or take 200 bushel an acre. We already know what the 5-year Olympic average price is going to be because, as a reminder, an Olympic average price is taking the last 5 years, marketing your average nationally, kicking out the high, kicking out the low. That price is going to be $5.03 for the crop that you just harvested and for next year, because that's just how the math works. When you take the Olympic averages, it's the same price at that point. So 200 times 5 is 1,000. I said, what was the payment cap? 12%. 12% of 1,000 is $120 an acre. Now I know that I have to take that 1,000 times 90% is my trigger. Okay? This is middle school math. 90% of 1,000 is $900 an acre. Now, just a simple algebra equation, 900 divided by a final county yield is going to tell me what the price has to be at least to not have a trigger in Ark County. Or 900 divided by a possible long-term marketing or average price, that's going to tell me what the county yield has to be. So if I have 900 and the marketing or average price for next year is 4, 900 divided by 4 is 225. 225 means the county must generate 225 bushel yield to not have an Ark County payment. Cass County hasn't ever done 225. It will in due time, but it certainly hasn't yet. So now I pair that up with my crop insurance piece. 95% coverage. If my insurance price happens to be $5, what's 95% of 5? Well, $4.75. From $4.75 and lower, the county yield has to climb. It has to go up and up and up to offset the drop of revenue as price falls. Crop insurance doesn't care about your farm program. Crop insurance doesn't care about your grain marketing. Farm program doesn't care about either one of those as well. They are all exposed to the Board of Trade. They all have different timings, but they are not intertwined in any way, shape, or form. So now put this together. Corn, let's just say we do go to 5, and we end up at 4 next harvest. You, the farmer, not physical percent sold on your production, but financially, you are probably pushing 150, if not closer to 200% financially protected at that point. Market goes down, crop insurance is making up penny for penny. Market goes down, farm program is making up an amount. You have to calculate what that is versus what I planted versus what my base acres are. But collectively, those two pots of revenue are going up faster than the drop of physical grain revenue is going down. So when I tell you, you want to sell $5 corn, no you don't. You want to sell some $5 corn, and you hope it goes back to 4. If I sell 25% of my crop at 5, 75% drops by $1, but that's the only 75% that's exposed to the market. Insurance and the farm program is paying me dollar for dollar that has nothing to do with my physical grain marketing and my physical crop. Okay? The equilibrium right now in this part of the world is legitimately $5.50 corn is equivalent to today's price. $5.50 corn. We have to be above $5.50 corn on the board, approximately 70 cents a bushel higher than where we are today, 80 cents for next year's corn crop, for your revenue to actually go from taking $1 out of your left pocket and putting $1 in your right pocket. So now, to kind of go back to that three-legged stool, think about that situation. I need a 70-cent rally in all reality to see my total revenue go up versus flatline in a 70-cent rally. If I sell something in that 70-cent rally, I'm not dictating not to do that. At that point in time, all I'm doing is speculating that the market's going to go down. How many times does a farmer want to speculate that the market's going down? Not very often. So we have to be calculated about our decisions on grain marketing. I will tell you, if I'm a 95 million acre corn farmer and an 82 million acre soybean farmer, just me, I farm all the U.S., and I have access to every single one of these programs. Insurance, doesn't matter what state I'm in, insurance is the same cost on ECO, SEO. Doesn't matter what state I'm in, Ark County and PLC all operate the exact same way. Doesn't matter what state I'm in, I can market my grain the exact same way. You know what I'm doing right now, specific to 2026, is not a damn thing. Because if I sell something today, I'm saying this in decades and decades and decades of wiping this out of your memory. You sell something today for next year's crop, you are creating bad risk. That is not an opinion on what the market will or won't do, but between now and planting, you sell something sub 5.25, you're creating bad risk. Because if you sell it, we always have opportunity cost. Market goes up, I didn't get to sell those bushels at a higher price, so be it. But at the same time, I'm losing money on the farm program until the farm program all of a sudden goes to zero, and now I need greater than 550 corn to offset what I lost on that percentage that I sold because of all the money going away. So a lot of pieces. It's not easy to wrap your mind around unless you do it repetitions. Maybe. What happened? Brad, got any ideas?
Derek?
Tell you what, let me just screenshot these into. Oh, I quit whenever I shut down power.
Nothing changed. Got all this?
Say what?
You got all that?
Oh, I got it all. You believe that, don't you?
Yeah.
All right, unfortunately I can't get you the visual of this, but let's just, one more time, I want to walk through the idea of how Art County specifically works, especially tied to this year's crop you just harvested, okay? Everybody has a smartphone, I'm guessing. If you would appease me in running your calculator here, I think doing the process would help you understand it better. So, our 5-year Olympic average yield in Cass County was 205.9. Our reference price is $5.03. That number equals what?
1,035.
1,035. What is 12% of that? $124 is equivalent to your max payment on Art County. If I have 1,000 acre of a corn base, I take 85% of those times that $124 an acre. That is a payment that I would get in October on my corn base acres from Art County this year, regardless if I signed up for PLC. Okay? Now, what was the number? 205 and 5, 1,025, 1,026 was our benchmark, our gross revenue?
1,035.
1,035. What's 90% of 1,035? 931. Okay? Last year's Cass County yield was just a shade under 200 bushel an acre. Do we think Cass County will go 200 this year? Sure. Up for debate, whatever. But let's just say it matches the exact same deal. So if I take that 931 number divided by 200 bushel an acre, which we'll know that final county yield by June, take that 931 divided by 200, and that's going to tell you what? What was it? 465. 465. What does 465 represent?
Price.
That means that the marketing year average would have to be at least 465 to trigger no Ark County payment. Presently, the marketing year average price is $4 a bushel. I can go back and forth on how you want to do this math, but 65 cents a bushel on 200 bushel corn is going to be greater than what the max payment is of 124, right?
130.
So what does that tell me today for the corn crop I might have in the bin? Ark County is already probably maxed out on your safety net. Absent of if the market rallies 15, 20, 25 cents, if the marketing year average is 50% established and in 1 month we go up 25 cents, well, in theory, the marketing year average should only increase by 10, 12, 13 cents. So now I get to redo that calculation all over again. But today, not rare, but unique, that Cass County is already maxed out. Now here's the good thing about Cass County. For years moving forward, the crop, Ark County this year, the 5 years of yields that they were using was 2019 through 2023. Okay, not 24, but for 25, the rolling 5-year Olympic average. Those yields were 207, 207, 222, 157, and 203. Olympic average, kicking out the 157, kicking out the 222, taking an average of the other three, equals the 205. The 503 price, equivalent of the last 5 years, 356, 453, 6, 654, 455. I'm kicking out the 654, I'm kicking out the 356, there I am. Okay? Now, when I fast forward to next year, if the marketing year average price doesn't go up and above 453 for this year's crop, that means that this year's $4 marketing average is just going to go away. Right? It's not going to be used in a calculation, which basically means 2026, we are already looking at a situation that the Olympic average yield is going to now be 206.5, so up 0.6 of a bushel. So let's just do next year's math already for a decision you're making 4 or 5 months. If I take 206.5 times 503 is
1,038.
1,038. What is 12% of 1,038? 124. Not too far off from this year. Max payment of $124 an acre on next year's crop. I know that I have the 90% trigger, but I want to do it a little bit different this way because now we're talking about proactive planning for Ark County and PLC decision next year, coupled with my insurance. If I have a 800-acre corn base, take 800 times 85%, that's going to be 680. Take 680 times 120, 124, whatever. 680 times 120, 124, something like that is what?
84,320.
84,000 on just those corn base acres. I've already taken up over half of my payment eligibility of 155,000. That's before considering the what if on soybeans. And let's just look at the soybean front. Maybe a little bit more of a boom or bust on yields around here on soybeans in the last several years. But let's just say that next year's beans, the county yields 55. The marketing year average price is $10. There's an $85 an acre Ark County payment at that point. $85 an acre on the balance of my base acres being soybeans times 85%. If I've got 1,000 acres of a bean base times 85%, 850 acres times the $85 number, well, my payment limitation is gone. I've blown past it. And that means two things. An opportunity could be missed. And secondly, the program has done everything it can for you at that point. It has maxed out your safety net. That's 55 bushel beans and $10 price in the county. And for years, we'd have killed for that. And it's running the risk of maxing your total payment limitation out. Hence why, all of a sudden, if husband and wife, I want that second $155,000 payment eligibility. There's no tax consequences. There's no structural changes. It's all how you certify it at the FSA office. On everybody's insurance documents, if you're already married, it's going to have probably your name, and then it's going to list your spouse on there. But just because it has your spouse listed on there does not mean that it's quote-unquote 50-50 at the FSA office. All right? Real money. Now, one other piece, back to this year's crop. Let's just say that you operated in a county around here that the county yield was huge. And all of a sudden the Ark County payment is smaller. We're now comparing it to what the PLC payment is. PLC matters on your PLC yield. So let's say again, I have 1,000 acres of a corn base and my PLC yield is 150. That's 150,000 PLC bushels. 85% of that is going to be 157.5. Oh no, excuse me, I did 180 yield there. 150, 22, 127.5. 127,500 bushel, penny for penny below a marketing year average price of 442 is now paid on those bushels. So if you backed into it again, let's just say I've got 155,000 one payment eligibility. That basically means I would have to have, give or take, 300,000 bushels of PLC bushels, which would be equivalent of maybe 2,000 acres of a corn base. PLC, just in a 40-cent situation, would already be maxing out your 155,000 payment eligibility as well. If market rallies, Ark County and PLC payments both go down. No secrets in that space. Markets go down, the PLC payment has no limit. It doesn't have that 12% payment limitation that Ark County has. If corn went to 3, you're going to get paid from 442 all the way down to 3 until you reach your payment limitation. So it's not your traditional marketing 101. Okay? I just encourage you that, as it sounds a little arrogant here to say this, but you guys in this room, if we put 150 other farmers in the surrounding area in the room that didn't hear this, they're going to be asking the wrong questions, having the wrong discussion, with no understanding or bearing of what every market move means to them. In a perfect world, how do things play out in the next 18 months? We have a slow, methodical rally into the month of February, gives you a crack at selling higher priced corn and beans in February and March for 2026. Don't forget about 2027 at that point. Knock on wood, prices are high enough that they cash flow versus our expenses. And then what do we want the market to do? That's where you make your money. And on top of that, maybe that would put enough pressure across all the nation to get costs down. But that's a big maybe. Because they're not oblivious to this either. And landowners are not oblivious to this either. That's a slippery slope. I feel for you guys there that renting a lot of land, they say, well, what about this payment? What about that payment? What about this payment you're getting? What about this payment? Why are you asking for rent to go down $30 an acre again? Slippery slope. Challenging situation. So, any questions on any of that? Yes, EPA, banker, crop insurance. FSA probably is your fourth choice because they're not going to be able to explain this stuff to you. Yes.
You take SCO and ECO, or do you just have to choose?
Nope, you can carry both. You can carry ECO and not carry SCO, and since I can, I thought I shouldn't, I'll confuse it more. There's another insurance product coming out now too. It's called CLIP, which means you could carry ECO from 95 to 86. From 85 to 75, you could combine the revenue guarantee of your corn and soybeans all together, and then carry by crop your multi-peril from 75 and lower. The CLIP is going to take the total revenue that you generate from both corn and soybeans combined versus the liability of the two of them together. 80% subsidized, cheaper than SCO, cheaper than multi-peril, still insuring dollars.
With SCO, don't you have to take PLC?
Used to. Now there is no connection. I would be shocked if something would unfold between now and March 15th that would lead this room to selecting PLC. It is highly likely our county. And I mean, you're talking, I don't even know what that situation would have to be because it's already in the money for next year. I may have said this before, there's already a check written to you for a moving amount based upon what the market does. It just hasn't been signed. And you get it 18 months from now.
When is it too late to add more people on here to get that more penalties?
By the time you certify. You could go on Legal Zoom and spin up an LLC in 90 seconds if you know what you're doing on a computer. He didn't get his $2 up here. No, but that needs to start with don't do things all loosey-goosey. CPA, attorney, banker, communication is critical, right? But it's not all that hard just to say, you're going to farm this ground this year. Whether, I think it's from what I've seen, if possible, the easiest way is to rent family-owned ground to that individual versus having to worry about changing the name on a lease on a cash rent situation. And it's a real pain in the butt if you're in a crop share.
Maybe some of the landlords get a first-time farmer tax rate.
Oh yeah, yep. Didn't even bring that benefit up. Tax savings for them. And there's probably, I'm going to use Brad as an example here. If this was around 10 years ago, how old are you now? 50?
42.
Let's just say that rewind to 10 years ago and Brad was just starting to farm. There's probably situations where his APH today versus where it is would be every bit of 15, 20 bushel an acre higher.
That's me.
Because, what's that?
That's me.
That's you. Yeah. And unfortunately, if this sounds like I'm a little condescending on other insurance agents in the space, but if an insurance agent doesn't know this and they just assign a T-yield to somebody, you're screwed forever. You can't come back from that. Where in this situation, you're literally getting to use the trend adjusted APH, not even the simple average of the farm. So if I got a farm that I've farmed for 20 years as the senior, and it's been corn, beans, corn, beans, corn, beans, I've got 10 years of corn history. Because of the trend adjustment factor in this part of the world, a yield 20 years ago might have been 170, but I might be adding 40 bushel an acre to that yield to come up with today's trend adjusted yield. And so all of a sudden, T-yield, I don't know, what's the T-yield here? 180? 170? It's low. I guarantee it's well under 200. So imagine a scenario of, oh, I'm going to take on this ground, or my senior is farming it. Their APH is 205, higher than a county T-yield 190. But then there's this other farm that has this 240 bushel APH. Well, I can go latch onto that 240, let the senior keep the other 240, and put that 240 on the farm that you only had a 210 APH on. And I get to save all that money. There's $150 an acre just on insurance, plus $15 an acre on insurance savings, plus the payment limitation. Every 100 acres is legitimately worth probably 20 grand. A lot of money.
Plus the tax benefits, and I don't know them, to the landowner. Renting it to a young farmer?
Yeah, I don't know if anything changed on that in this, but I do know that they clamped down on it just a little bit. I don't think it's quite as easy, or the amount that you can actually do. I feel like there's a tax credit limit in dollars amount that you cannot exceed from renting to a young farmer, but there's still something there to start from. And when I say young farmer, like, I'm not a big believer in, all of you put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get where you are today. And I do think that there's this younger generation out there that says, you owe me it. You got to earn it. Now, what I'm getting at here is not at all going down that path, but I would hope that everyone in this room has, a succession plan or how they're passing things along eventually. And if all of a sudden every year you're clipping a coupon of $100,000 that's staying within the family, if it's a family operation, why not do it? Why give it to the government for insurance protection? Why not get more money from the government when it's eligible? And I didn't maybe say this earlier, legitimately, the worst case in doing all of this is prices are higher, yields are great. The worst case out of all of this is that you saved insurance premium. That's a pretty good worst case. Pretty good worst case. And then you'll work with the CPA and banker to figure out all the money flow internally. But one piece, if you're a C Corp, that's an important one. Easy 156 and C Corp. Talk to your CPA now if you're a C Corp, because that takes time to get that shifted.
Thanks, Jared. That's really good. And
Was I supposed to be done by 11? Or is somebody else supposed to be done by 11?
Oh, we got
My
that
bad.
done. We've already got that done.
very important information. The amount of dollars that trades hands is immense in today's landscape. And if we don't look at this like a business, which it is, and make some of those decisions from a business discussion standpoint, I think we're missing the boat, which is why we get people far smarter than ourselves to help us. So thanks, Jared, for coming down. Let's take another break. I know we're going to go over time, but again, Bodie's still going to talk BW Fusion, carbon ideas. Feel free to leave. Feel free to stay. I know everybody's busy. I appreciate everybody coming. Stay if you can. And at that point, we'll maybe try to figure out some lunch, and we'll go from there. So thanks again. If you got to leave, I understand, no problem. But Bodie's going to do a real good job too. So
Stand up.
take a break.
Oh, let's do that. I gotta stand up too.